A very good afternoon to all the viewers. Welcome back to another episode of BW People HR Voices. Today, we are joined by Ms. Rajita Singh, the Chief People Officer at Kyndryl India. Her expertise lies in leading large-scale transformation with business outcomes. Prior to this, she led the HR organization at Broadridge Financial Solutions India. She's the youngest convener of the CII HR panel for the state and also serves on the committee of the NASSCOM Regional Council and NASSCOM HR and D&I Council. Firstly, welcome Rajita. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
For all the viewers, today's conversation is going to revolve around nurturing employee voices at work. Now, post the pandemic, Rajita, we are seeing that employees, they want to be heard loud and clear. So employee voices and incorporating employee voices in decision making has become really important. According to you, what could be some strategies, what could be some platforms that can be implemented to encourage employees to share their opinions, their feedback, any type of ideas that they have or any kind of concerns that they have?
So I want to back up a bit, Savi, and I want to first talk about what, if we talk about voice in the OB parlance or the organization behavior parlance, voice is nothing but behavior. Okay, so the point we're trying to get at now is that post-pandemic, how has behavior changed, right? And there is a research that was published very recently, I think just a couple of months back, and it had a very interesting perspective. It said it doesn't matter what time of the era you work in, that is whether it is pre-pandemic or post-pandemic, all what matters is the respect and the regard for social hierarchy. So one person would behave in a particular way depending on what social hierarchy means to him or her. So let me break down the social hierarchy first, right? It is essentially an implicit or an explicit way of recognizing anybody who has a respect either in the system, in the family, or in the society, right? And that's called the social dimension. So now let me come back and say, what are the different things that organizations need to do and why do they do it? So again, if we talk about behavior and how we want people to behave in a particular way, an organization can only provide with an ecosystem wherein you have systems, processes, which are open, and policies which encourage openness. So a few things what can be done, right, is you have inclusion networks. These are not necessarily just for diversity, but these are for any kind of interest that's there. So everybody gets together, shares. The ideation happens across the organization, not necessarily in silos. Then, in addition to ideation, in case there are some innovative ideas that come up, maybe in the way the service is being conducted or the way a product is being delivered, so it becomes important to provide for that kind of openness, wherein people are like, yes, I can come forward and express myself. Possibly provide for 360 feedback. Everybody should get to know, regardless of whether he or she is a leader or not, know about what's important. Being able to walk up and approach anybody in the hierarchy is very important. Of course, I'm not going to talk of compliance related, like the whistleblowing policy and things like that. People should come forward. But my fundamental belief is that we should have it so open from a collaboration standpoint that you don't need anonymous forums for people to come and express. They should be able to talk uninhibited, and then the organization continues to work on it. So those are a few things that I think we could do.
Right. So you mentioned about active listening at the organization. Listening leadership is one concept that has become a priority for organizations today.
Yeah.
So what role does listening leadership play in creating an environment where employees actually feel safe and secure while sharing all their feedback that they want to give?
So I'm going to give you an analogy. It could be a bad one, but I'll still give it, right? When kids are growing up, you want to go to parents and you want to share. You have, and I'm making it very simple. You have two categories of parents. One who are very hierarchical and say, I'm the parent, you can't talk to me about 1, 2, 3, 4 things. Go figure on your own, learn your life, it's your life. Second is that parents are like, no, we're your friends. We evolve with you. We learn with you. And that's where the bond is extremely special, when you're a teenager or maybe when you're having midlife crisis and so on and so forth, right? So I think active listening as part of leadership is just that parent who's absolutely open, who doesn't take anything personally, because at the end of the day, human beings are good. Okay, nobody has a maligning intention, especially when you're giving more than 2/3 of your waking hours on a daily basis to the organization. People understand you're committed. right? So being there from an empathetic standpoint is very, very important. And actually, evolving a little more than empathy, I think having the compassion, because compassion adds more from feeling rather than, yeah, I'm here and I understand what's going through, but I feel for you kind of thing. So that's something that's very important. And some leaders that I can talk of who are extremely great at active listening is, one is the body language. Second is the way they possibly paraphrase or follow up with you after some point in time. It could be something very personal that you've spoken, right? Or just somebody who wants to just pick up the phone and talk to you and say, I'm not reaching out to you from a hierarchy standpoint. I have a personal thing. Just listen to me. I don't want to go to the EAP that the organization is providing for. So don't get very compartmentalized and I'm a leader and these are the only things that I will do. I think it has to be totally open and then evolve. So
I understand, but there are some managers, some leaders that come with the authoritative kind of work style that they have, right? So at Kyndryl, I want to ask, at your organization, how are you training the leaders? How are you training the managers to become more inclusive, to become more active listeners at the organization?
So I don't know if you already know of this, but Kyndryl was one of the only organizations that rolled out something called an Empathy Inclusion Index.
Okay.
So this was done even before I joined, actually, and I think it was very, very good. Is as part of their engagement survey, what happens is that you are evaluated on your empathy index as well, and as a leader, you get to know where you stand. Today, on my face, you're going to say, I'm great, I'm listening to you, I make you feel comfortable, you can come voice your opinions, but what really is happening about it? So I think leaders are very conscious of that not conscious of the score, but conscious of the fact that I need to be empathetic because I belong here and I'm representing the organization. There are a lot of sessions that happen, from an inclusive mindset standpoint, from trainings on what leaders really need to do. How do you handle crucial conversations? Obviously, it's not going to be, pro. Oh, yeah, you come do whatever you want and I'm going to let you do it. There are certain things that and values that belong to the organization. So living up to those values is equally important. So there's a lot of training that happens. There are a lot of networking forums for leaders because we believe maximum learning happens in an informal setup, right? So that is your networking within the organization and outside the organization. And of course, reverse mentoring is a concept that we introduced, a couple of months back. It's been extremely well received because the leaders are the mentees now. You have to listen and you have to know what's happening, and you're providing the mentors an opportunity to come and tell you, this is not what we think is right, this is what we think is great, let's amplify it. So that's what we do at Kyndryl.
That's great to hear. You also spoke about belongingness. So I'll come to the diversity part of the employees. We know that employees, they come from diverse backgrounds, from underrepresented groups as well. So how do you ensure that all the employees, they feel equally heard, equally valued at the organization? They feel a part of the decision-making process.
So Savi, that question I think needs to be broken down in two dimensions. Why do I say that? Is because different strokes for different people. While I've provided an ecosystem, not everybody would be comfortable coming and expressing in the open. So we have one-on-one sessions, ask me anything sessions. And these are open houses wherein nobody goes prepared, right? You just talk about it. Now, what happens from a diversity standpoint, because not everybody is comfortable, we also have communities called KINs, which is Kyndryl Inclusion Networks. And you have KINs related to women, you have KINs related to PWD for, the queer part of the community. And there, I think people, at least what I have noticed, is that people are a lot more comfortable because they believe that these people belong to me. They understand what I'm trying to say. So what we have done is we've actually broken down hierarchy, this time when we came forward. So the chairs and the sponsors for each of these KINs were not decided by the leadership team. People signed up with their statement of purpose, and you know how tough it is to write a statement of purpose. And they spent the time coming and saying that this is what we want to do. And it was extremely difficult, but I think we've got a decent set of leadership that's running it. And we're already prepared with the next round of leaders as well, because there was such an overwhelming response on this.
That's lovely. But what about a distributed workforce? People who are working remotely, sometimes they feel hesitant to reach out directly to senior executives. So how can the process be a little easier for them? How can they voice out their opinions? What could be some of the, I would say, digital tools that could be used?
So I think this virtual setup, we work in a hybrid model, right? So the virtual setup is here to stay. So if you ask me, people are more comfortable virtually than in person to talk about things. What are the tools to answer your question? What are the tools that can be used? Obviously, we use Teams very extensively. We have Viva slash Yammer, where people can just post in, and there are all sorts of even uncomfortable subjects that people actually tag you on it. It's fine for people to tag you and for you to respond to them, at the right time and at the right with the right answer or whatever. So there's a lot that's going on the asynchronous communication, but these are the tools which are more informal that are used extensively. Emails obviously are used, and then in case anything needs to happen, then there are meetings that are set up. But there's definitely a point that's made wherein people do come in person for the when we do the open houses or when we do the skip levels, they largely happen in person and not over the video.
Right. But in case they want to share something anonymously, are there tools for that as well?
There's lots of things. So there's a software that we use internally, and we have an employee concerns team that's dedicated just on this. So this is not whistleblower, but this is my grievance. This is my, that I was on a call, say for example, with Savi, and Savi made a comment on my spectacles. And I'm like, I didn't like it. So, I'm going to come and tell you that I didn't like it, and Savi needs to get the message. So you have a whole lot, I'm trivializing it, but all what I want to say is that there are multiple forums available and people know exactly where to go. There's this saying, I could do everything, but if people don't know how to use it, it makes no sense. And so we actually very openly publicize everything that we do.
That's great. Now, I want to talk about the middle layer of management. The middle managers, they act as a bridge between the top executives and also the frontline workers. Frontline workers, I feel, are the most comfortable talking about their grievances with the middle managers, with their direct reporting managers. So, what is the role of middle layer of management in, all these employee voices? How do they incorporate their own ideation in this? What are your views?
Um, I'll extend the analogy of the parents. Okay, now the parents became grandparents. So the grandparents are the senior leaders. The parents are the middle management, and then of course you have the kids, or the front lines. Now, if you look at it, if for any for a belief or a behavior or a mandate that an organization have, the senior leaders come out and say, this is how we're going to behave, we're going to be respectful, we're going to be extremely trusting, and we're going to be absolutely open and transparent. Say for example, these are the three things that they say. So the portion of the mid management or the parents is now to walk the talk.
Right.
It's not just I'm going to cascade your message down, this is what the leader said, but I will behave in a particular way. Like I said, voices are all about behavior. So it's very important, and that's when the criticality of the mid management comes into play. So understanding what the leaders are trying to say, that's a grandparent, so that you have anecdotal stories coming down, and then cascading it down to the front lines, and this is what really needs to happen. So they play a very important role in my opinion. I know that
Talking
there are some
about,
schools
yeah,
of thought. Yeah, go ahead.
please continue.
Okay, so I was like, I know that at times there's this notion that no, we're just adding another layer. It should be a flat organization. But honestly, for a ship to sail, you do need at times deadwood, right? I'm not saying that this is deadwood, but that's just an analogy that you do need this layer because it's very important and critical.
Right, I agree with you. But speaking about anecdotal stories, I want to understand from you, Rajita, in your personal experience, let's say a decade or 2 decades back, what were some of the challenges that you faced as an employee? And how have you seen the workplace transitioning over the years? What kind of evolutions have you seen?
So the good thing is you said personally. So let me get started on that and just give you a few. When I had joined, it was a very hierarchical organization. So that because and as Indians, we have this thing that somebody with gray hair I need to respect. I can't say no on the face. So I will sit in the meeting, I'll agree with everything, but I'll go back and say I didn't really like it. I could say it, so I'm going to send an email about it. Right? That used to be my approach earlier. And then I think in a matter of a year or so, I realized that there's no point, killing myself, and I'm going to be absolutely expressive and voice my opinions. So while that was not necessarily very well received, because a bachus just joined, this is a campus to corporate, right? When you join out of campus, are kya bol rahe ho types, So transitioning from that to a workforce today where all leaders are extremely savvy, extremely open and conscious of the fact that this position is a responsibility. And it's not an easy position to have. Earlier, leadership was a privilege. It still, remains to be a privilege, but the type of privilege, because of the exposure that people have, has shrunk, and at times it could be extremely stressful. So leaders need to know that today leaders are, they know the fact that anybody can walk up to me, say anything, and I have to be non-judgmental and unbiased in my approach when I'm solving for things. So I think that has been a huge shift in leadership. I also think, from an organization standpoint, when the workforce was coming in, way before I came in, it came from a scarcity mindset. I need to do a job, I need to do a 9 to 5 job. Now we come in from an abundance mindset. I have anything and I have everything. So while a job is important, I'm spending two-thirds of my time. Post pandemic, what's happened is people are like, I'm going to do this much, and that's why compressed work weeks have come into picture. That I will finish my work, but I also need this personal time, and I also need this travel time, and I also need this hybrid time. So leaders have to learn how to adapt. We had a joke, when I was in corporate, that people do MBW, which is management by wandering. Now, when you
Okay.
have a hybrid workforce, you can't really wander around and you're only wondering what's happening. But I think the lack of sense of control and ability to adapt in a digital world is what's become very important. And leaders are actually working on that.
Right. I'll add a question to this. Organizations, they have a multi-generational workforce. What kind of difference in communication have you seen within the Gen Zs? And if you compare it to the older generations that are working?
The Gen Zs will essentially, so let's say, for example, they'll take any platform,
Hmm.
right? You can prescribe that use only Teams or use only Yammer and Viva. There will be WhatsApp channels. There will be YouTube channels wherein people will go in and communicate and do all that stuff. What used to happen earlier is people were very, like I told you, they used to respect the hierarchy, and the social dimension was, very, very, I'd say, in play. People would first send an email. Is it okay for me to come? Go to the EA. Can I come to you and do forward? Nowadays, people don't really have the patience. They're just going to write to you directly. They'll copy your EA saying, I wrote to your EA once, didn't reply, and I'm reaching out to you because I don't have time. I want an answer immediately, or I want a resolution immediately. Or even if it's a personal problem, I'm going to write to my leader and say, you need to solve for me. I need to get out of this. So that's what's happening in today's world.
Right. Rajda, implementing these changes is a different thing, but measuring the impact and outcome of these changes is even more important, right? So, what could be some of the KPIs or let's say metrics that you use to measure the results of the employee voice initiatives that have been happening in the organization?
The way I would say it is, I think for us it's a mirror. The behavior of how people express themselves. So how do we see that on a timely basis? One is surveys and feedback. We do a lot of that. We do pulse surveys. Participation in these surveys actually is a reflection that people think that they're being heard or not heard. Then the turnover or the attrition, as we call it, the attrition is a factor of two things. One is what's happening in the industry, and two is what's happening internally. So largely, if you give percentage and weightage to what's happening internally, that's what makes all the difference. And if you move on, other than that, if you talk about it, the way diversity and inclusion is regarded in the organization, shows that people are open, they can come, they can talk, and they can be whatever. So that's important. Productivity and performance. Now, this is a very sensitive topic to all HR people and business people across. And how do the KPIs evolve over a period of time is what talks. If you're still talking of dashboards being green 99.99%, then there's a serious concern. Okay, then we really don't know what we are trying to arrive at from an organization standpoint. Issue resolution. If something has been raised, how much time do we take to go back? Do we take the NPS scores? NPS is the latest, in thing when it comes to how am I measuring myself? So doing an NPS on resolution um, of the problem. Then we spoke of ideation and innovation, right? So how many ideas, talk openly and publish how many ideas people submitted and how many of those were taken up, and how many people actually signed up and volunteered that, yeah, I'm here and I want to, be a part of this. Then the other is about employee well-being. it's a true reflection on when you're actually doing your health insurance renewals, when you're doing your life insurance renewals, you actually get a drift of what's really happening in the organization. Are people feeling okay? We have something specifically on mindfulness, we have on mental well-being. So how is that being adapted and used? And we spoke of the 360, so I'm not going to talk about that. And I think celebrating success and failures both is important. Many a times we have this hall of fame and it only remains a hall of fame. I know that there were one or two companies, I think a decade back, which had a wall of shame as well. They used it as a motivation for the team to know it's okay to fail fast and move ahead. So create anecdotal evidences of those stories, share it, make people heroes. It doesn't matter. Benchmarking. Many a times when we do this voice thing, now we tend to get in our well. Let's understand what the others are doing. How do we fare with regards to that? And is there anything that we need to do about it? And I think lastly is the long term impact. So while agile and there are different methodologies that come in for projects that you get together for a short period of time and you move on, it's not just about the technology or the method or the process. I also think the willingness and the company culture that encourages people to come forward on this on their own is what makes the difference. So and CSR is a classic reflection of this. The minute you're doing a CSR and you're sponsoring lunch and you're doing a pickup and drop, clearly shows your people are not aligned. They're coming here for something else than that. So that's what I think is a true measure of a
Right.
voice.
Thank you for sharing these insights. My last question to you is actually personal. I was just going through this research lately where they were talking about exit interviews versus taking feedback from the existing employees, the employee engagement surveys. What, according to you, is more relevant? Or do you think is the actual reflection of employee voices?
Uh, I think so let me tell you what are the kind of people who do feedback, right? At times when you do employee feedbacks or engagement surveys, the ones who are paid the most are the ones who take the time to write comments. Okay,
Hmm.
so if I got 100 comments, at least 70 of them would be paid and 30 of them are appreciating me for what I'm doing. Okay, so if I was to compare either or say which one makes more sense, honestly, to me, engagement is very important. If there is a dip in engagement, I know exactly where that's going to go because a dip in engagement is a trigger for exit.
Right.
I want to be a reactive person or a reactive organization wherein because somebody is resigned, I'm going and doing an exit and saying, tell me, and I'll figure it out. The challenge on exit is at times when you're doing it in-house, when they're leaving, they obviously want to be sweet because they want a straight, good exit. And second is if you do a third party exit or an audit of people who left with a sample at that point in time, given the situation that the individual left in, there could be something that will come back on the management, there could be something that could come back on shared services, there could be something that comes back on the client. I mean, there are a lot of variable factors. And if we really want to put our hand on something and make the difference, I think it's important to, when people are in-house, to talk to them and use engagement surveys and act on them very seriously.
Right. Well, thank you, Rajita. Lastly, I want to ask you, most of our viewers, they're HR professionals, employers, employees. What would be your last piece of advice to them?
My last piece of advice would be, regardless of things being implicit or explicit, you need to follow your heart and you need to know what matters to you the most, because only then can you make the difference in an organization and in the systems. Otherwise, you're just another furniture in the office. So make the
Thank you
difference.
so much, Rajita, for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your valuable inputs with us. Thank you once again.
Sure. Thank you, Savi.